So we're here at Oak Street, where we're doing an archaeological excavation. We're trying to find out a little bit more about Liverpool's courtyard housing. So this was a type of housing that was very common in the 19th century. It started to be developed through the 18th century. By the mid-19th century, about half of Liverpool's working class population lived in courts. But they became very poor quality. They became known as slum housing. So there was a very thorough programme of slum clearance in the late 19th and early 20th century. It's very exciting to be able to see the structure and to find out a little bit about how it was built. We found out new things about how the courts were built, which we didn't know before, and to find some of the objects that people must have kind of used in their everyday lives around court housing. So this is Pembroke Place, and this is the last surviving example of Liverpool's courtyard housing. It's a unique survival. Just because these rooms were converted to the back rooms of shops, we happen to have these amazing examples of courtyard housing. So here we can see just how small a space the courts were. We can find out a little bit about life in them, and actually we've even found out a little bit through census research about who lived in these courts and what they were like. In some ways, the courts are a little bit surprising. They're reasonably well built. They've stood the test of time, really. They're 3 stories high, so there's an entranceway obviously on the ground floor with one room, just one room wide and one room deep. So that ground floor would be the living space, and then there are 2 rooms above which would have been bedrooms. As Liverpool starts to develop in the mid-19th century, new streets are laid out, gradually moving north and also south of the town. Space is left so that enough room is there for court housing to be inserted. So as opposed to earlier court housing, which was really cramming in existing spaces, this was planned and developed in a formal way. Certainly people who continued to live in them through the 20th century never saw them as slums. People preferred to live near the docks so that they could get to and from to go and see what work was available. You see a real mixture of different people. So obviously we've looked in detail at the Pembroke Place courts and who's living there. And we've got people born in Liverpool, people born elsewhere around Lancashire, but also people from Scotland, from Wales, from Ireland. We've got a real mixture of different people kind of all coming together and living in this kind of growing town. So these courts on Pembroke Place are the last example of courtyard housing. So they're listed buildings, and it's really important that they are protected and looked after. They're the only place where we can really get a sense of the size of courts, the spaces that people were living in, and the density of population in court housing in the 19th century in Liverpool.